I'm Beck, and this is my podcast, Cop a Feel, where I'll be investigating my favorite cop shows and movies for signs of excessive force and excessive fiction. Each week, I'll be slapping the cuffs onto one of my favorites to ask the real question. Is this just harmless entertainment, or is it a sneaky 90-minute recruitment ad with a cool hip-hop soundtrack? I'll be talking good cops, bad cops, and of course hot cops. Anything with Denzel, no shame even as he gets older, and anyone in between. Basically, if a main character carries a badge and the script says you're off the case, I'll be rewatching it. Then I'll be rating it on my propaganda scale. From, seems harmless enough, but definitely all about cops, to this is literally propaganda with a hip-hop overlay. So grab a donut with coffee, then slap on your own seatbelt, because it's time to question authority and its IMDb rating. Come and ride along. This week, I'm reviewing The Heat, directed by Paul Feig. It's one of my favorite buddy cop comedies. On a personal level, I would rate it a 6 out of 10 for entertainment, because I think it could do more to reinvent the genre. However, in some ways, it reimagines the classic mismatched partner formula, with having two women storm through Boston to take down a drug lord, all the while battling toxic masculinity within the system and within themselves, really with how they relate to each other and how they view each other. You've got Ashburn, played by Bullock, with her uptight professionalism, Yale education, and strict need for protocol. She's really awkward for me to watch. I cringe every time. I think it's because I'm such a rule follower that she hits close to home. She's so awkward she doesn't realize that her brown-nosing ways and her poor interactions with her peers is what poorly impacts her chances for promotion. Then you've got Mullins, played by McCarthy. She's the contrast. She's street smart in some ways and ultra explosive, but she's also the black sheep of her family. So I would say she's socially awkward in a lot of ways too. She just doesn't care. With a fridge full of weapons and a history of misconduct, including arson, they're yin and yang. Of course, Ashburn and Mullins are forced to work together. Some of what follows is your average good cop, bad cop routine, but then there's also gendered survival tactics. Their shared identity as women in a male-dominated field raises the question, are their hardened personalities shaped by needing to prove themselves, or were they always destined to disrupt? I have loved both women for so long. Sandra Bullock in While You Were Sleeping, Melissa McCarthy in Gilmore Girls as Sookie. But I love McCarthy's performance in this, as well as her performance in Spy, which is a lot of the same themes. But she really plays this well, especially during the film's more outlandish moments, while she's chasing one suspect with another one on the back seat, or whether she's playing roulette in an investigation, an interrogation. She leans fully into comedy. Then you have Bullock's Ashburn. She's struggling to gain credibility, even while she's being objectively competent. Other than the tracheotomy she fails at Denny's because of her know-it-all attitude. She has no training. She literally saw it on TV and thought she could do it. But again, her struggle to gain credibility brings the film back to reality, along with Mullins' struggle of being both a cop and a community member. Ashburn's reading of Mullins' file and her eventual defense of her partner, where she goes, "That officer right there is a better law enforcement officer than anybody in this room, myself included," marks her growth, along with all her shit fuckers and middle fingers. I think Feig cleverly, and I don't know if this was on purpose, but I think he cleverly inserted scenes that feel almost like spiritual sequels to Miss Congeniality. Most notably in the club bathroom makeover, compared to the first film's computer file bikini banter. Gracie is hardened now as Ashburn, but her struggle with what is seen as much-needed femininity and professionalism remains central. The angel of the law image that Mullins perceives gets doused in whiskey, chaos, and car bombs. I think this comedy isn't blind to the ethics of its protagonist, but it does wrap up so much misconduct in humor, even though it's always for the greater good. Mullins is reckless but deeply invested in her protecting her neighborhood. Ashburn, while committed to due process, willingly starts to break rules when her instincts override protocol. They storm into crime scenes, they interrogate with threats and violence, and frequently disobey direct orders. But the Heat doesn't pretend these actions are standard. Obviously, the women are removed from the case at one point. However, as vigilantes, they end up being backed, and that meets a checklist of what we love to see in movies about vigilante justice. Here's the question. Is this propaganda or not? It features plenty of misconduct and vigilante behavior, but I do think it stops short of being an outright propaganda. The focus remains on the personal dynamics, the comedy, and the broader theme of women navigating broken systems. The film doesn't glamorize the badge, but instead often highlights how hard it can be to fit in a system while being comedic. I wish I could quote the scene about Mullins' family asking if they're Knox instead of Narcs, but we can't all be Ben Affleck in a Dunkin' commercial. But again, they don't fit. They don't fit with her family. They don't fit in the system. They're seen as outsiders. Here's how it lands on my scale. I struggled with putting it between a 4 and a 6, but again, I felt like it stopped short of being a propaganda. I didn't give it badges for badge bias. I don't think it romanticized or blindly glorified police work. Mullins doesn't fit in her family because of it. They're not proud of her because of it. They see her as a knock. Also, Ashburn doesn't fit in and outside the system. Charm. Neither woman has it. They're not smooth. They're not flirtatious. They're not dangerously charismatic. I did give them 2 badges for lawless likability. I love their dynamic. I love them as vigilantes. It's very comedic. It does seem cool or too cool for school and too cool for rules. 4 and 5 is where this got tricky. I gave it 2 badges for civilians because it's definitely has questionable ethics here. Non-cop characters are not treated ethically. It is done in a humorous way, and they are shown as being criminals who seem to deserve it, but it could have gone with how the film shows blind spots or shows the harm caused by the system. That's where I got a little bit tricked up. I didn't give it points for having blind spots, but I could have. I gave those badges to civilians instead. But there are racially targeted jokes, and there's jokes about neighborhoods being seen as sketchy, even though Mullins lives in the neighborhood and she's proud of protecting the neighborhood. So let me know what you think in the comments. Again, I ultimately rated it a 4 out of 10, so I think it's relatively harmless. I did see that some reviews did say that it wraps up misconduct in feminism, but still one of my favorites. Here are my final thoughts. I do think it works best when seen as a character-driven comedy. Every time I watch it, I think of White Chicks. I know it's probably because Marlon Wayans guest stars, but it's loud, it's chaotic, it's funny. However, it does have the grounding instead of brotherhood. It has the grounding in sisterhood, struggle, female rage. I watch it repeatedly. It's one of my favorites because of its surprising emotional core. I gave it a low personal rating of 6 out of 10, which would be about a 60%, even though it's one of my favorites, because it's not trying to reinvent the genre. However, it does let 2 women pack the heat and do it on their own terms. I think it rightfully earns its place in the buddy cop canon. Every time I watch a film, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but I picture what films it would go best with when I'm recommending to somebody. I picture what other movie would it be with in a Walmart deal bin. I don't know if they still have those, but you got really good deals on 2 or 3 films. I think it earns its spot right beside 21 Jump Street in 2012. What do you think? Maybe White Chicks? I think it's too brash for Miss Congeniality, but it could be fun for someone going off to college, right, to have that pack, if they've still got a Blu-ray player. Let me know what you think of this review. Does the Heat hold up in its humor, or is it too filled with hot fuzz? My podcast, Cop-a-Feel, will be back soon to frisk more of my favorite, not so favorite cop contents. Here's your stop on this ride along. Signing off, I'm Beck with Cop-a-Feel.